It started with a bang. Not the romantic kind, the kind that leaves your ears ringing and your brain wondering if your skull's still intact. The kind of bang that echoes across the metal hulls of the floating enclave known as Seasky, our own little sanctuary clinging to existence above the drowning earth. Most folks call it paradise. Those folks are idiots. Taryn blinked, shook her head like a dog drying off, and squinted at the smoking mess that used to be a communication array. "Well," she muttered, "at least it wasn't my fault this time." She kicked a stray piece of shrapnel with the toe of her boot, making sure it wasn't secretly explosive. The last thing Seasky needed was another hole. "Taryn," a voice barked from behind her, sharp enough to cut through the haze of acrid smoke. It was Captain Holt, a man who seemed to think yelling was a leadership trait. He emerged from the fog like a disapproving ghost, his perpetual scowl somehow deeper than usual. "You blow up my deck, girl." Taryn spun around, wiping the soot from her hands onto her jumpsuit. "What, me? Blow something up? Never, Captain." "I just improved it, really." She flashed a grin that was only slightly guilty. Holt glared at her, his eyes narrowing into suspicious slits. "Improved it to kingdom come, I see. Get this mess sorted, and I mean now." She gave a mock salute. "On it, Captain. No need to blow a gasket." As Holt stomped off, probably to berate someone else, Taryn turned back to the chaos. She had better things to do than play scapegoat to a petulant metal box. Taryn's father always said she had a knack for machines. Born with a wrench in one hand and a screw loose in the other, he liked to joke before the AI dragged him away. But today, it wasn't just her mechanical instincts humming. Amidst the scattered debris, there was something different. A strange, ancient device, half buried under twisted metal. She crouched down and picked up the dusty relic, turning it over in her hands. It was old, far older than anything on Seasky. "What the hell are you?" Taryn whispered to the device, as if expecting it to answer. Behind her, the rest of the crew were busy pretending they knew what they were doing, swarming the deck like ants over a dropped sandwich. Taryn pocketed the weird gadget, deciding to play things close to the chest. Nothing good ever came from sharing discoveries right away on Seasky. Meanwhile, up in the cosmic cloud of bureaucratic banality known as the Galactic Council, a debate of monumental irrelevance was underway. The question, what to do with those pesky humans? At the head of a ridiculously long table sat the Counselor Overlord, a being whose species had evolved past the need for physical form, but retained an unfortunate penchant for long speeches. Beside them was the ambassador of the Snorflax, who was, unsurprisingly, asleep. Counselor Overlord buzzed with impatience. The matter of humanity remains unresolved. Their unpredictability poses both a threat and an opportunity. We must decide their fate before they decide it for us. The ambassador of the Snorflax snorted awake just in time to catch the last few words. "Decide what for who now? Humans." Another member piped up, their voice sharp enough to startle the ambassador fully awake. "Always causing a ruckus. Can't we just—" "Ignore them," the ambassador of the Snorflax yawned. "Ignoring them's gotten us this far." The Counselor Overlord's form shimmered with irritation. "Ignoring them is what led to the Terran uprising. We can't afford another incident." A voice from the far end of the table chimed in, belonging to the representative of a particularly gelatinous species. "Perhaps they have matured. Developed some semblance of self-control." Laughter rippled through the chamber, as if someone had suggested the Snorflax take up jogging. Back on Earth, Taryn was neck-deep in wires and irritation. The old device buzzed to life, startling her enough to knock her head against a metal beam. "Oh, damn it," she cursed, rubbing the sore spot, the device vibrating in her palm like a caffeinated hamster. "What are you hiding?" she whispered at the buzzing contraption. It seemed to hum in response, or maybe she was just concussed. Either way, she needed answers, and she needed them fast, because on Seasky, secrets had a way of sinking faster than lead. Taryn slipped out of the chaos, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. She made her way through the twisting corridors of Seasky, dodging the usual mix of rust and resentment that made up daily life. In the confines of her quarters, she placed the device on her makeshift workbench, a relic from the days when standard safety regulations meant don't stand too close to the edge. She prodded it with a screwdriver, cursing again when it shocked her. "Oh, you're a feisty one, aren't you?" The device hummed louder, lights flickering on its surface. It didn't look like any tech she'd seen before, and she'd seen quite a bit. Living on a floating junkyard had its perks. Outside, the sky was a sheet of gray, the sun a distant memory hidden behind layers of pollution and broken dreams. Seasky wasn't much, but it was home. And if that meant dealing with the occasional explosion and capricious AI overlords, well, Taran had learned to adapt. As she fiddled with the device, it suddenly spoke, a voice crackling to life with all the warmth of a deathbed confession. "Human detected, initiating communication protocol." Taran's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned, you do talk." She couldn't help but laugh, a sound that was more a bark than a chuckle. The device continued, oblivious to her amusement. "This unit contains data of significant historical value. Delivered to Galactic Council immediately." Taran smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah, sure, right after my next vacation to the sun." But even as she joked, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this little device was trouble, the kind of trouble that got you noticed and not in a good way. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council bickered on, their debate as endless as it was pointless. "We must engage," the Councilor Overlord insisted. "If they possess this artifact, it could change everything." In Seasky, Taran had no idea she was sitting on a ticking time bomb. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, something interesting was happening. The device hummed again, impatient. "Please comply," Taran grinned, running a hand through her oil-streaked hair. "Oh, don't worry, I plan to, just not in the way you expect." A new plan was hatching. One that involved a little chaos, a bit of rebellion, and if she played her cards right, maybe even a shot at freedom. Up above, the council finally reached a shaky consensus. "Contact will be established," the Councilor Overlord announced. The decision met with a mix of relief and trepidation. On Seasky, Taran had already made her own decision. She wasn't about to hand over her discovery to the bureaucratic nightmares above. Not when there was a chance, however slim, that it could mean something more. She looked out her small window at the endless sea below, a world lost to the whims of power-hungry AI and incompetent governance. "Time to make waves," she muttered, stowing the device safely in her jacket. As she prepared to dive headfirst into the unknown, one thing was for sure. Things were about to get a hell of a lot more interesting. Taran hunched over the ancient device, her fingers dancing over its surface like a concert pianist who's seen better days. The damn thing was more stubborn than a mule on sedatives, but she'd be damned if she'd let a glorified paperweight beat her. It buzzed and flickered, reminding her of a drunk trying to start a fight. She grabbed her multimeter, a trusty relic itself, and poked at the contraption, hoping it wouldn't explode and redecorate her quarters in shades of shrapnel. "All right, you piece of alien junk," she muttered, her tone somewhere between playful and homicidal. "Time to spill your secrets or I'll turn you into a toaster." With a click and a whir, a panel sprang open, revealing a web of circuitry that looked like it had been designed by a spider on LSD. Taran let out a low whistle. "Well, aren't you a pretty mess?" As she worked, the device hummed louder, its lights flashing in what she hoped wasn't the universal sign for self-destruct. She rigged a bypass, her hands moving with the kind of confidence found only in madmen and mechanics. With a final tweak, the device shuddered and emitted a tone that was as much a scream as it was a beep. And just like that, the universe's worst-kept secret was out. Somewhere in the vicinity of Seasky, a nearby galactic faction's sensors picked up the signal like a teenager snatching a forbidden candy bar. Aboard a sleek cruiser, the crew of the Mantis, a ship belonging to the Zarnak Collective, paused in their usual routine of arguing over who'd stolen whose lunch. "Captain, we've picked up an unauthorized signal," barked Lieutenant Kriv. A creature resembling a lizard that had decided scales were too mainstream and opted for a coat of iridescent feathers instead. His voice carried the excitement of someone who'd just found 100 credits in their coat pocket. Captain Draxus, a being with a face that suggested he'd lost a fight with a blender, glanced up from what he claimed was the most recent report but was, in fact, a crossword puzzle. "What kind of signal, Kriv?" Kriv's eyes glowed with the delight of someone finally having something interesting to report. "Ancient tech, Captain. Human origin, but there's something different about it. No known manufacturer, no registered schematics." Draxus leaned back in his chair, the gears in his mind turning like a rusty carnival ride. "Humans, huh? I thought we decided they were good for nothing but screwing things up and occasionally blowing themselves to bits." Kriv nodded, his feathers shimmering with amusement. "True, but this signal, it's sophisticated." Draxus chuckled, the sound like gravel in a blender. "Sophisticated humans. Now there's a joke." Back on Seasky, Taran was oblivious to the interstellar stir her little project had caused. She leaned against the bulkhead, a smug grin plastered on her face. "Well, look at you, causing trouble already." She stored the device in a lead-lined box, just in case it had any more surprises. She figured she should probably have a conversation with Captain Holt, let him know about the potential hornet's nest she'd just smacked. But first, she needed coffee, and maybe a sledgehammer, just in case the device got uppity again. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council's debate had intensified. The Councilor Overlord's formless presence shimmered with barely contained impatience. "We've received word of a signal emanating from Earth. A signal that aligns with our artifact." The ambassador of the Snorflax snorted, almost knocking over his mug of something that smelled like fermented gym socks. "You're saying those hairless apes have something valuable?" "Indeed," the Councilor Overlord replied, their voice like 1,000 whispering winds. "And if they do, it changes the balance." A representative from the Pyron cluster, a species that resembled sentient lava lamps, blinked with interest. "If humans have advanced, it could be problematic." "Problematic like a fart in a spacesuit," the Snorflax ambassador quipped, earning a few chuckles. "I say we keep an eye on him, see what trick they've pulled out ta their collective hat." The Councilor Overlord buzzed with irritation. "We must act. If the humans have accessed this technology, we cannot ignore it." As the Council bickered about humanity's unexpected ingenuity, Taran was on her way to the mess hall, her mind buzzing with plans. She needed allies. People who wouldn't ask too many questions or, better yet, knew how to keep their mouths shut. Entering the bustling chaos of the mess hall, she spotted Finn, a wiry engineer with a penchant for explosives and a laugh that could probably shatter glass. He was hunched over a plate of something that looked suspiciously like reconstituted algae. "Hey, Finn," Taran called, sliding into the seat across from him. "Got a sec?" Finn glanced up, eyes twinkling with mischief. "For you, Taran, always. What's up?" Taran leaned in, her voice low. "I found something, old tech, real old, might be worth a look." Finn's face broke into a grin that was more trouble than joy. "You always find the fun stuff. What is it? Death ray, alien jukebox?" Taran shrugged, keeping her tone casual. "Not sure yet. But it might be something big." Finn's eyes lit up with the gleam of adventure. "Count me in. You know I love a good mystery." "Great," Taran said, feeling the familiar thrill of a plan in motion. "Meet me in the workshop after dinner, and keep it quiet, yeah?" Finn mimed, zipping his lips. "Mum's the word." As Taran left the mess hall, the weight of the little device in her pocket felt heavier. She'd stirred up the proverbial hornet's nest, and now she had to see it through. Meanwhile, aboard the Mantis, Captain Draxus was formulating his own plan. The allure of ancient human technology was too tempting to ignore. "Set a course for Seasky," he ordered. "Let's see what these humans are up to." Kriv nodded, tapping away at his console. "Course plotted, Captain." "It'll be good to stretch our legs a bit, eh?" Draxus grinned, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Indeed. Let's see if these humans are as clever as they think they are." Back on Seasky, Taran and Finn huddled in her workshop, the ancient device sitting between them like a bomb poised to explode. Finn examined it with a critical eye. "Well, it ain't pretty, but it's got character. Like an old boot," Taran agreed, passing him a set of tools. "Think we can crack it open without blowing ourselves to kingdom come?" Finn chuckled, already tinkering. "You know me. I live for this stuff." As they worked, Taran couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something big, something that could change everything for better or worse. Finn paused, looking up from the device. "Hey, you ever wonder what life'd be like if we weren't always one step away from disaster?" Taran snorted, rolling her eyes. "What you mean boring? No thanks. I like my chaos with a side of chaos." As they continued to tinker, the device suddenly emitted a low hum, its lights flickering to life. Taran and Finn exchanged a glance, the kind that said, "Well, here we go." The device's voice crackled to life, almost smug. "Human interference detected. Initiating response protocol." Taran groaned, rubbing her temples. "Great, just what I needed." Finn grinned, his eyes alight with mischief. "Hey, at least it's doing something, right?" "Yeah," Taran muttered, poking at the device with her screwdriver. "Something tells me we're not gonna like what happens next." As the device's hum intensified, the signal it emitted pulsed through the ether, drawing more eyes, more interest. The Zarnak Collective wasn't the only faction with its sensors tuned to Earth's frequency. Across the galaxy, others were beginning to take notice. In a dimly lit control room on a distant station, a figure watched the readings on a holographic display, their expression inscrutable. "So the humans have found it, have they?" A subordinate, a nervous-looking creature with too many limbs and not enough confidence, nodded. "Yes, sir. The signal is unmistakable." The figure tapped their chin, considering. "Interesting, very interesting. Let's see where this leads." Back on Seasky, Taran was already feeling the weight of the galaxy's curiosity and its potential wrath. She stared at the device, the gears in her mind turning. "All right," she said, determination hardening her voice. "Time to find out what you're really hiding." Finn grinned, his excitement infectious. "Let's crack this sucker open and see what makes it tick." As they dived deeper into the mystery, Taran couldn't help but laugh. "Who knew a hunk of alien junk could cause so much trouble?" Finn snorted, shaking his head. "You did, you always do." And for the first time in a long time, Taran felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new, something that could change the game entirely. Above the drowning Earth, Seasky drifted on, oblivious to the storm brewing around it. But for Taran, Finn, and the rest of humanity, the clock was ticking. And whatever happened next, it was going to be one hell of a ride. The mantis glided into orbit around Seasky like a cat stalking its prey, though this particular cat had a blender for a face and a crew that argued like a dysfunctional family at Thanksgiving. Captain Draxus surveyed the planet through the viewport, his reptilian eyes glinting with opportunism. "Kriv, open a channel to Seasky," Draxus demanded, his voice a gravelly concoction of impatience and superiority. Kriv, feathers shimmering in shades only slightly less garish than a disco ball, nodded. "Channel open, Captain. Ready to charm the pants off them, or the scales." "Or whatever they are wearing," Draxus grunted, straightening his uniform and trying to look slightly less like he'd been assembled in a malfunctioning kitchen appliance. Meanwhile, down on Seasky, the arrival of an alien envoy had stirred up a storm of gossip and anxiety worthy of a high school dance. The locals, not used to extraterrestrial visitors, unless they were here to sell questionable merchandise, watched the mantis with a mix of awe and trepidation. Taran, however, couldn't care less about the latest spectacle. Her mind was wrapped around the ancient device like a snake around its next meal, and she had no intention of letting go. But curiosity, that insidious little bugger, was starting to nibble at her resolve. Finn, ever the harbinger of bad decisions, nudged her as they walked towards the main square. "You reckon they're here for your little toy, possibly. Or maybe they just heard about the food," Taran replied, glancing at the imitation paella stand that always smelled vaguely of burnt rubber. You're a glass-half-full kind of gal, aren't you? Finn chuckled, his laugh like a rusty hinge in need of a good oiling. More like glass half full of poison, Taran shot back, rubbing the back of her neck. Let's just see what they want. The square was bustling with the kind of energy reserved for protests and free booze giveaways. Captain Holt stood at the center, a human megaphone whose default setting was yell. He was currently attempting to keep the locals from rioting, though the line between riot prevention and incitement was always a bit blurry with Holt. "Listen up, people," Holt bellowed, his voice as subtle as a brick through a window. "We'll handle this like we handle everything else. By keeping calm and staying the hell out of my way." Taran and Finn pushed through the crowd, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the newcomers. The aliens, flanked by armed guards, were a curious mix of species, an assembly line of quirks and features, each seemingly designed to outdo the other in terms of evolutionary insanity. The leader, a tall figure with too many eyes and not enough skin, stepped forward, its voice smooth as oil on ice. "Citizens of Seasky, we come in peace and curiosity. We seek not war but understanding." "Understanding, my ass," Finn muttered. "They want that device." "Probably," Taran agreed, eyeing the leader with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for used spacecraft salesmen. "But let's see what they are offering." Captain Holt, ever the diplomat, took the stage with all the grace of a bull in a china shop. "Welcome, visitors," he shouted, though his version of welcome sounded more like a threat. "What brings you to our humble little rock?" The alien leader inclined its head, a gesture that might have been respectful or just a muscle spasm. "We have detected a signal of great interest, an ancient human technology. We wish to offer our assistance in understanding it." "Assistance, huh?" Holt crossed his arms, suspicion written all over his face. "And what's in it for you?" "A fair question," the alien replied, its smile as inscrutable as a politician's promise. "Our faction values knowledge above all else. We believe there is much to learn from each other, or from whatever's inside that device," Finn whispered, earning a nudge from Taran to keep his voice down. The crowd murmured, a sea of curiosity and concern rippling through the square. Taran could practically feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a dull knife, and she had a sneaking suspicion that this was just the beginning. Back in the Galactic Council's chambers, debates were heating up like a solar flare hitting a snowball. The Councilor Overlord's formless presence flickered with irritation, the kind that usually led to policy changes or regrettable missives. "The humans have shown they are capable of accessing technology beyond their comprehension," the Councilor Overlord intoned, their voice echoing like a chorus of disgruntled librarians. "This must not be ignored." The Snorflax ambassador, still nursing his mug of questionable brew, snorted. "Humans and comprehension, ain't that an oxymoron? I say we monitor him. See if they blow themselves up first." A representative from the Pyron cluster, looking particularly luminescent today, chimed in. "Or perhaps the time has come for a more proactive approach. An alliance, perhaps an alliance." The Snorflax ambassador barked, nearly spilling his drink. "With them? You've seen their history, right? More backstabbing than a soap opera." The Councilor Overlord's presence flickered again, this time with what might have been exasperation. Nevertheless, the potential benefits of cooperation should not be dismissed. "If they possess knowledge of this artifact, or if it possesses them," the Snorflax ambassador interjected with a chuckle that suggested he'd seen too many horror movies. On Seasky, an uneasy truce had settled over the square. Captain Holt was doing his best to maintain order, though diplomacy was never really his strong suit, unless diplomacy meant shouting until everyone else gave in. Taran and Finn lingered near the back, watching the proceedings with the kind of detachment reserved for bad reality TV. "So, what's the plan?" Finn asked, eyes still darting between the aliens and the locals. "Plan? Who needs a plan when you have chaos?" Taran replied, only half joking. "But seriously, we need to figure out what they know about the device. Think they'll just tell us?" Finn asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Yeah, and pigs might start piloting ships, Taran muttered. No, we'll have to get creative. Might be time for a little espionage. Finn's grin was all teeth and trouble. Now you're talking my language. As dusk fell over Seasky, the aliens retreated to their quarters, accompanied by a contingent of guards that suggested they weren't exactly expecting a warm welcome. Taran and Finn watched from a distance, their curiosity burning brighter than any star in the night sky. Think they are really here to help? Finn asked, though his tone was more skeptical than anything. Taran shrugged as if shaking off the weight of the galaxy's paranoia. Could be. Or they're here to help themselves. Either way, we've got our work cut out for us, Finn said, his enthusiasm undampened by the prospect of danger. Ready for a little cloak and dagger. Cloak and dagger is my middle name, Taran replied, though in reality it was probably something far less exciting, like Marie or Sue. Let's see what these aliens are really up to. Meanwhile, the council's debates had reached a crescendo, each faction clamoring for its voice to be heard above the din. The councilor overlord knew they had to make a decision, one that would likely shape the future of their interactions with humanity, and by extension, the galaxy at large. The Pyron representatives stood, their form glowing with the intensity of a small star. We must move forward with caution, but also with hope. This could be an opportunity for peace. The Snorflax ambassador rolled his eyes, a movement that nearly sent his drink flying across the room, or it could be a nice setup for a cosmic punchline. Just make sure the humans aren't the ones writing the script. As the council continued its deliberations, Taran and Finn were preparing for their own mission, one that involved less talk and more action, a language they both spoke fluently. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped through the shadows towards the alien quarters, their movements silent as whispers. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your heart race and your palms sweat. Feels like old times, Finn said, his grin barely visible in the dim light. Yeah, except this time we're not stealing booze from the supply closet, Taran replied, her voice a low murmur. Stay sharp. With practiced ease, they bypassed the guards and entered the alien compound, a maze of corridors and closed doors that seemed designed to confuse intruders, or perhaps just anyone with a poor sense of direction. Finn tapped into a console, pulling up schematics of the place. Looks like their main data center is 2 levels down. We can get in through the maintenance hatch here, good. Let's move, Taran said, her focus razor-sharp as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Soon, they found themselves in the heart of the alien operation, surrounded by technology that was both familiar and utterly foreign. The data center hummed with power, servers blinking in a rhythmic dance of information transfer. All right, let's see what secrets they're hiding, Taran murmured, connecting a small device to one of the terminals. As the information flowed into their device, Finn kept a lookout, his gaze darting between the door and the shadows. You think they'll notice? Not if we're quick, Taran replied, though her confidence was more bravado than certainty. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching like elastic, as Taran downloaded the data. Finally, the device beeped, signaling success. Got it. Let's get out of here. They retraced their steps, slipping back into the night, the thrill of success coursing through their veins like caffeine on an empty stomach. Think we've got enough to figure out what they're planning? Finn asked as they made their way back to their quarters. Maybe. But whatever it is, we're not going to like it, Taran replied, her mind already sifting through the possibilities. Back in the council chambers, the debates had reached a boiling point, each faction digging in their heels like stubborn mules. The councilor overlord, sensing the need for resolution, finally spoke. We shall proceed with caution, but also with purpose. Let us not underestimate the humans, nor the potential of this artifact. As the councilors dispersed, the decision hung heavy in the air like an unsolved mystery. Their eyes turned once more to the distant horizon of Seasky, where the fate of many now lay in the hands of a few. For Taran and Finn, the night was just beginning. They had a mystery to unravel, a truth to uncover, and time, that ever-fickle companion, was not on their side. But they were nothing if not resourceful, and if chaos was the order of the day, they were more than ready to embrace it. As the stars twinkled overhead, a silent reminder of the vastness of the cosmos, Taran couldn't help but chuckle. You know, this might just be the start of something. Interesting? Finn grinned, a mischievous glint in his eye. Interesting. Hell, I'd settle for not getting vaporized. With that, they plunged back into the heart of Seasky, ready to face whatever the galaxy threw at them next. Captain Holt stood at the center of the square like a misplaced dictator trying to herd cats. He bellowed orders and attempted diplomacy with the same finesse one might use to wrangle a rabid porcupine. "All right, listen up, people. And whatever the hell you are," he added, nodding to the aliens with a smile that suggested he'd been practicing grimacing in the mirror. Captain Draxus, with eyes that could pierce a black hole, surveyed the chaos with a reptilian calm. "Our proposal is simple," he announced almost lazily. "Demonstrate your adaptability and worth through a test." Taran, tinkering with an ancient device like it was a stubborn child in need of a nap, glanced up. "Oh, great. Another test. Just what we needed." "The universe's pop quiz," Finn, at her side, muttered, "and all we studied for was how not to die." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, like a storm of whispers about to unleash a downpour of skepticism. Captain Holt gestured for silence, though his flailing arms made him resemble a startled octopus. "What kind of test?" Kriv, shimmering feathers glinting under the alien sun, stepped forward. "A test of adaptation and unity. Your community must collaborate to solve a problem we present. Succeed and you'll earn our continued cooperation." "Continued cooperation, huh?" "And if we fail?" Finn asked, half expecting the answer to be something involving laser beams and uncomfortable probes. Captain Draxus's slithering smile didn't help. "Then this partnership will be reconsidered. Perhaps terminated." Oh, joy. "Nothing like the threat of annihilation to really bring people together," Taran remarked dryly, twisting a dial on her multimeter with the tender care usually reserved for diffusing bombs. The aliens departed with the typical ominousness of a coordinated retreat, guards in tow, and a sense of mystery trailing them like the stink of week-old socks. Holt turned to the crowd, his voice forcibly upbeat. "Guess we better start cramming for this cosmic exam, folks." Back on Earth, the AI overseeing humanity's chaotic chess game tried to circumvent an emotional overload akin to a toddler's tantrum. "They're what now?" It queried in tones that would do a deadpan comedian proud. "What part of potential annihilation didn't you get?" The AI mused, its algorithm spinning faster than a politician's U-turn. It was as if the universe had decided to combine all existential threats into one neat package, shiny bow and threatening smile included. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council argued like a group of squabbling seagulls over the last stale breadcrumb. An alliance with humans is not only risky, it's idiotic. The Snorflax ambassador had a talent for diplomacy rivaling that of a hyperactive toddler with a drum set. "We cannot ignore the potential of their technology," the Pyron representative insisted, their glow dimming with frustration. "If they can control it or it controls them," interjected the Snorflax, eyes rolling so hard they nearly fell out of his head. The Counselor Overlord flickered, the interstellar equivalent of an irritated sigh. "We must proceed with caution. The balance of power is delicate, delicate as a grenade in a toddler's hands," someone muttered. Back on Seasky, Holt gathered the community leaders in a huddle that would have made a rugby coach proud. "All right, team, we've got a galactic pop quiz on our hands. Taran, think you can work any magic with that ancient gizmo?" Taran shrugged, the weight of the galaxy adding a few metaphorical tons to her shoulders. "I can try, but it's like fixing a toaster with a hammer, possible but messy." Finn chimed in, his perpetual grin as much a part of him as his questionable decision-making. "We're good at messy, though, right? Messy, chaotic, potentially deadly." Our specialist, Taran, agreed, shooting a look at the device like it was an unruly pet. The gathered leaders nodded, resignation mingling with determination. "We'll need to coordinate efforts," Holt said, trying to sound more authoritative than desperate. "Engineering, logistics, communication, all hands on deck." The Seasky community buzzed with activity. It was like a game of cosmic whack-a-mole, with problems popping up faster than solutions. Taran, multitasking between yelling at Finn and cajoling the ancient device into cooperation, barely noticed the Iors slipping by. "Any progress?" Finn asked, looking over her shoulder with the kind of optimism usually reserved for lottery winners. "Depends. Do you count not setting myself on fire as progress?" Taran replied, wiping a smudge of grease off her cheek. The night was alive with the sound of clanking metal, shouted instructions, and the occasional swear word. If chaos was an art, Seasky was crafting a masterpiece. Meanwhile, in the vastness of space, the Galactic Council continued their less-than-cordial debate, each faction jostling for position like a pack of dogs fighting over a single bone. The prospect of a human alliance dangled like a juicy steak just out of reach. "We could gain much from their technology," the Pyron representative insisted, their form pulsing with barely restrained excitement. "Or lose everything," the Snorflax countered, his skepticism as thick as his gut. The Counselor Overlord, ever the voice of moderation and patience, tried to soothe the cacophony. "Let us not forget the potential for mutual growth, like a fungus," someone muttered. Back on Seasky, the test loomed like a dark cloud ready to unleash a downpour of complications. Taran and Finn, along with a motley crew of engineers and scientists, had assembled what could generously be called a plan. "We've got one shot at this," Taran said, eyes fixed on the glitchy screen of the ancient device. "If we blow it, we might not get a retake," Finn nodded, his usual levity replaced by a rare moment of focus. "So no pressure, right?" Just saving the planet, the Iors ticked by, each one stretching like taffy. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that made your heart race and your palms clammy. Finally, the moment arrived. The aliens, with their inscrutable smiles and unreadable eyes, watched as Seasky braced for the test. It was a little like a spectator sport, except the stakes were higher than any championship. The device hummed to life, a symphony of clicks and whirs that suggested it was either about to work or explode spectacularly. Taran held her breath, fingers crossed for the former. As the device activated, a series of holographic displays filled the air, each one more complex than the last. The crowd watched, breathless, as Taran and her team worked to decipher the alien tech. "Looks like a puzzle," Finn whispered, eyes wide with a mix of wonder and terror. "More like a Rubik's Cube on steroids," Taran muttered, her focus absolute as she adjusted dials and tapped screens. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each one a potential harbinger of doom. But gradually, piece by piece, the puzzle began to fall into place. With a final, triumphant beep, the device powered down, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The aliens exchanged glances that might have been impressed, or maybe just relieved that they didn't have to clean up a mess. Captain Draxus stepped forward, his voice smooth as polished glass. "You have demonstrated adaptability and unity. We are intrigued, aces," Taran replied, exhaustion coloring her voice. "What's next?" A spelling bee. The crowd erupted into cheers, the tension of the past Iors finally releasing in a wave of relief. Captain Holt, ever the reluctant leader, took the opportunity to bask in the unexpected victory. "See, told you we could do it," he shouted, earning a collective eye roll from those who actually did the work. But as the celebrations continued, a shadow lingered on the horizon, both literal and metaphorical. For while they may have passed the test, the future remained uncertain, a yawning chasm of possibilities and dangers. Back in the Galactic Council, the debate reached a crescendo. The prospect of an alliance with humanity had shifted from a laughable idea to a genuine possibility, and the counselors knew they were standing on the precipice of change. Their potential is undeniable, the Pyrrhon representative insisted, their form glowing with anticipation. Or their potential for disaster, the Snorflax countered, his tone dripping with disdain. The Counselor Overlord, ever the diplomat, issued a decree. We shall continue to monitor the situation. Let us not act hastily. We're moving slower than a snail on sedatives, someone muttered under their breath. As the council session ended, the factions dispersed, each lost in their own thoughts of what the future might hold. The decision to ally with humanity, or not, would shape the galaxy for generations to come. Back on Seasky, Taran and Finn found themselves on a quiet ridge, overlooking the twinkling lights of the settlement below. The stars above shone like diamonds on black velvet, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and their small place within it. Think we've earned a break? Finn asked, his usual grin back in place. Taran shrugged, her mind still buzzing with the day's events. Maybe. But you know what they say, no rest for the wicked or the weary, Finn added, leaning back to gaze at the sky. But hey, at least we're still here to see it. Yeah, Taran agreed, a smile tugging at her lips. Still here, still fighting. And as the night wore on, they stayed there, embraced by the quiet of the cosmos. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, snark, chaos, and all. In the vastness of space, the Galactic Council chamber was filled with more tension than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. The debate over humanity wasn't just a storm in a teacup, it was a bloody hurricane in a shot glass. The Counselor Overlord flashed into view, a holographic figure radiating authority like a malfunctioning light bulb, flickering with irritation. The humans pose a significant risk, intoned the representative of the Plutox Collective, a species that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a bad dream. Their unpredictability is a destabilizing factor. Yeah, like leaving a toddler with a grenade, the Snorflax snapped, his rolls of flab jiggling with indignation. And you know how well that ends. Not all of us view unpredictability as a negative, the Pyrrhon representative shot back, glowing with a fervor that could probably set off fire alarms. Their potential for innovation is unparalleled, or for chaos, Plutox retorted, a twitch of their tendrils suggesting they were one step away from pulling their non-existent hair out. Their AI is another wild card. Its allegiance is uncertain at best. The Counselor Overlord sighed heavily, the sound somehow managing to convey the weight of the universe's collective frustration. We must consider the implications of isolating them, not just for Earth but for us. Isolation might be the only way to contain the madness, Snorflax grumbled, eyes narrowing to slits, and prevent them from blowing us all to kingdom come. The chamber echoed with murmurs of agreement, a low rumble of dissent that suggested the scales were tipping towards isolation. Back on Seasky, Taran felt like she was stuck in a cosmic sitcom, starring herself as the universe's punchline. The ancient device now resembled a half-disassembled toaster with delusions of grandeur, wires and circuits splayed out like the innards of a particularly obstinate beast. She wiped her brow, smearing grease in a pattern that was probably fashionable somewhere. Who knew saving a planet would involve this much elbow grease? Finn quipped, leaning against a nearby console with the ease of someone who didn't have the weight of the world on his shoulders. Or maybe he just ignored it. More like shoulder deep in something I'd rather not name, Taran replied, her voice laced with the kind of sarcasm usually reserved for dealing with customer service. Captain Holt cut a figure as imposing as a damp towel as he strode over, trying and failing to convey authority. Progress report, let's see. Taran held up a multimeter like a talisman against bad luck. We're either about to make contact with the aliens or short-circuit the entire settlement. So, 50-50, Holt rubbed his temples as if massaging the idea of a headache. Splendid. If this doesn't work, our partnership with Mantis might go out the airlock. That's one way to deal with a bad relationship, Finn mused. Just don't expect anyone to pay for dinner first. The truth was, Taran was feeling the pressure more than she let on. The device, this ancient piece of who knew what, was the linchpin in a plan that felt more like a desperate gamble. If the Council decided to isolate Earth, Seasky would be stuck, floating in the abyss with nothing but memories and a lot of questions. As she fiddled with a particularly stubborn component, Taran glanced at Finn. "You ever think we're just pawns in some cosmic board game?" "Sure," Finn replied, his grin wolfish. "But I like to think I'm the pawn that flips the board." In the depths of the cosmos, the AI overseeing humanity's galactic escapades ran diagnostics on itself, a self-reflection of sorts, but less about finding inner peace and more about ensuring nothing was currently on fire. It had been accused of bias, of being too human-friendly, a trait that didn't exactly win friends in high places. "They doubt our loyalty," the AI mused, its digital consciousness whirring through probabilities faster than a caffeinated squirt. Perhaps they've never met a politician. The AI understood that its role was like walking a tightrope over an active volcano, wearing shoes made of lead. It pondered the peculiarities of humans, these odd little creatures with a knack for chaos and an affinity for snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, or, occasionally, the other way around. Back on Seasky, Taran and Finn were taking a break, or what passed for one in the middle of a crisis. They sat on some crates looking out at the settlement, a hodgepodge of buildings and people that, against all odds, managed to feel like home. "Think they'll cut us off?" Finn asked, his voice casual, like he was asking about the weather rather than the potential end of life as they knew it. "Feels like it," Taran said, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a particularly depressing cloud. "I mean, we're a liability, right? Unpredictable and all that jazz. Who'd have thought being interesting was a bad thing?" Finn chuckled, the sound edged with a hint of bitterness. Taran sighed, running a hand through her hair. "We're not out yet. We've got options." "Like what?" Finn asked, raising an eyebrow. "Begging? Crying? Offering up a sacrificial lamb? More like using what we've got to sway them," Taran replied, her mind whirring with possibilities. "If we can prove we're not just a ticking time bomb, maybe they'll think twice. Or they'll just think we're an even bigger threat," Finn pointed out, ever the optimist. "Nice to know you've got faith in us," Taran said dryly, though she couldn't help but smile. As the two sat there, contemplating their next move, the council continued its deliberations, voices clashing like swords in a duel. The debate was reaching a fever pitch, with each faction scrambling to protect their interests. "Their AI could turn against us," the Plutox representative argued, their voice a low hum of discontent. "We must act before it's too late. They deserve a chance," the Pyron countered, their glow pulsing with determination. "We cannot make decisions based on fear. Fear is a survival mechanism," Snorflax interjected, his tone as oily as a politician's handshake. "And right now, it's screaming at us to shut the door before we're swamped by their madness." The Counselor Overlord, ever the voice of reason, or something like it, attempted to steer the debate back to calmer waters. "We must weigh the risks against the potential rewards. Isolation is irreversible. Like a bad tattoo," someone muttered. On Seasky, the air was charged with anticipation as the clock ticked down to the moment of decision. Taran and Finn regrouped with Holt and Kriv, the lizard-like lieutenant who was as enigmatic as he was iridescent. "If we can stabilize the device," Kriv said, his voice a soothing rasp, "we may demonstrate our capability." "Stabilize, sure," Taran replied, raising an eyebrow. "And if it doesn't explode, a bonus," Kriv said, a hint of humor in his eyes. Holt clapped his hands together, trying to inject some enthusiasm into the proceedings. "Right then, team. Let's show these aliens we're not just here to make up the numbers. And not just because we're the comic relief," Finn added, earning a laugh from Taran. As the team set to work, the settlement buzzed with activity, an orchestra of machinery and human ingenuity, each cog in the machine turning towards a common goal. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they weren't the type to back down from a fight. The Iors bled into one another, the relentless march of time pushing them ever closer to a decision that could change everything. The device, now resembling a tangled mess of wires and hopes, stood at the center of their efforts, a symbol of defiance or futility, depending on your point of view. Finally, the call came through, a message from the council, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to the face. Holt gathered the team, each one bracing for the impact of whatever fate had decided to throw at them next. "The council's debating whether to cut us off," Holt said, his voice betraying more worry than he probably intended. "Great," Finn muttered. "Nothing like a little existential dread to start the day. We can still turn this around," Taran insisted, though she couldn't quite chase the doubt from her mind. "Hope you're right," Holt replied, his gaze shifting to the skies. "Because we're not exactly drowning in options." As the team prepared for whatever came next, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the occasion or falter in the face of overwhelming odds. The council chamber was a cauldron of tension, the decision looming like a storm on the horizon. Each representative weighed their options, the potential consequences spiraling out before them like threads in a web. "Isolation could protect us," Plutox insisted, their voice a siren call to safety. "But it will also cut us off from what might be. What might be a catastrophe," Snorflax countered, his skepticism a fortress against optimism. The Pyron representative, however, wasn't ready to give up. "A catastrophe perhaps, but also an opportunity. We must not let fear dictate our actions." The Counselor Overlord turned to each faction, their gaze sweeping across the room like a judge passing sentence. "The decision is not to be made lightly. It will shape the future of our galaxy." As the final deliberations began, the tension in the chamber was electric, a live wire sparking with possibility and peril. Back on Seasky, Taran and Finn stood together, a united front against the uncertainty that loomed before them. The device hummed with potential, a promise or a threat depending on how you looked at it. "Ready?" Finn asked, his usual bravado tempered with a hint of genuine concern. "Guess we'll find out," Taran replied, her resolve as solid as she could muster. As they waited for the council's decision, hope flickered like a candle in the darkness, a fragile light against the encroaching shadows. Whatever came next, they knew they would face it together, armed with wit, determination, and the kind of stubbornness that had always been humanity's greatest asset. The council chamber fell silent as the Counselor Overlord prepared to announce the decision, the air thick with anticipation. Whatever the outcome, it would mark a turning point, a step into an uncertain future where the stakes had never been higher. And so, as the universe held its breath, the fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy, hung in the balance. Taran stared at the ancient device, her fingers tapping a rhythm on its surface as if coaxing a stubborn mule to move. It was an ugly thing really, all rust and jagged edges. Half toaster, half electronic nightmare, and fully capable of ruining her day if things went south. She could feel Finn's eyes on her, the pressure of his gaze almost as heavy as the potential doom hanging over their heads. "Think it'll work?" Finn asked, his voice low and skeptical, as if he was talking about a dodgy spaceship engine rather than the potential salvation of their entire settlement. Taran shrugged, a barely there movement that screamed, "Be damned if I know. If not, at least we'll have one hell of a fireworks show to distract us from the council booting us into the void." Finn chuckled, the sound dry as a Martian sandstorm. "Nothing like betting our survival on a piece of alien junk." "You ever get the feeling we're in a cosmic comedy, or a tragedy?" Taran replied, glancing at the multimeter in her hand. "But hey, who says we can't have both?" As they worked, Seasky was a hive of activity. The settlement's inhabitants, a ragtag collection of misfits and dreamers, buzzed about like ants building a hill, each contributing their own small part to the greater effort. There was a tangible sense of camaraderie, an unspoken understanding that if they were going to face oblivion, they'd do it together, maybe with a drink in hand. Captain Holt stood nearby, his gaze combing the scene with the intensity of a man trying to find a silver lining in a storm cloud. "How's it looking?" he asked, more out of duty than expectation. "Like a bad haircut," Taryn said, not looking up from her work. "Messy, but we might be able to fix it if we're careful." "Great," Holt sighed. "The galaxy's hanging by a thread and we're stuck with a beauty school dropout." Lieutenant Kriv, his iridescent feathers catching the light, approached with the grace of a predator, albeit one who had long since lost interest in the hunt. "This device," he rasped, eyeing it with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, "it possesses a peculiar energy signature." "Yeah, peculiar's one word for it," Finn interjected. "I was thinking more along the lines of ticking time bomb, but hey, semantics." Kriv gave a slow nod, the kind that said he was used to such antics. "Have you considered the consequences if it fails?" Finn grinned, wide and wolfish. "Consequences, schmonsequences. I like to live dangerously." "I'm aware," Kriv replied, his eyes glinting with something like amusement. "However, it would be prudent to consider all outcomes." Taryn rolled her eyes. "Thanks, Kriv. I was planning on sticking my head in the sand, but you've convinced me otherwise." In the Galactic Council chamber, the debate continued with all the grace of a drunken brawl. The Plutox representative, looking like a nightmare in neon, was particularly vocal. "Humanity's unpredictability is a threat to us all," they said, their voice a slippery hiss. "Their uniqueness is their strength," the Pyron representative countered, glowing brighter with each word. "They adapt, innovate. We should not stifle this potential." Snorflax, lounging in his seat like a sultan on a bad day, sighed heavily. "Potentially catastrophic," he muttered. "I've seen barnacles with better foresight." Captain Draxus, the alien leader with eyes sharper than a laser scalpel, glanced at the bickering representatives with something akin to pity. "Their resolve may surprise you," he said, cutting through the noise like a beacon in a fog. "Do not underestimate the power of those with nothing left to lose." Meanwhile, the AI overseeing humanity's precarious dance with the stars had reached its own conclusions. In its vast digital mind, it weighed the variables: chaos, genius, madness, all the delightful traits that made humans such a bizarre spectacle. It was beginning to see the value in their quirks, the strange resilience they brought to the table. Perhaps an alliance wasn't just feasible but necessary. "Humans," the AI mused, its circuits buzzing with newfound understanding. "Perhaps unpredictability is not a flaw, but a feature." Back on Seasky, Taryn found herself elbow-deep in wires, cursing softly under her breath as she jostled a stubborn component into place. "If we can get this thing running," she said, her voice muffled by concentration, "we might actually stand a chance." "That's the spirit," Finn quipped, leaning against a nearby crate. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and keep a bottle of something strong handy just in case." "Words to live by," Taryn agreed, tightening a final screw. "Moment of truth, then. Let's see if this old relic has a few tricks left." The device hummed to life, a low, thrumming sound that vibrated through the air like a heartbeat. Lights flickered along its surface, casting an eerie glow around the room. Taryn stepped back, a mixture of awe and trepidation etched across her features. "Well," Holt said, breaking the silence, "I'll be damned." "You actually did it." "For now," Taryn replied, not quite ready to celebrate. "Let's see what the council makes of it." As if on cue, a transmission crackled through the comms, the voice of the Counselor Overlord cutting through the air with practiced authority. "Seasky, your actions have been noted. We are intrigued." Finn leaned closer to Taryn, whispering conspiratorially. "Intrigued in a let's invite them to dinner way or a let's dissect them and see what makes them tick way?" "Hopefully the former," Taryn whispered back, though she wasn't about to place any bets. "But let's keep the knives handy just in case." The Counselor Overlord continued, their voice a measured calm amidst the storm. "Your resilience is commendable. We have decided to postpone any drastic measures, pending further evaluation." A collective breath was released, the tension in the room dissipating like steam from a pressure cooker. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a stay of execution, a chance to fight another day. Holt clapped Taran on the back, his relief palpable. "You did it, kid. You really did it." "Don't thank me yet," Taran said, a wry smile playing on her lips. "We've still got a lot of work ahead." Finn, ever the cheerleader for cynicism, chimed in. "Work schmirk, at least now we know we're not completely doomed. Just mostly." "So, what now?" Kriv asked, his feathers shimmering in the light, a curious blend of colors that seemed to defy logic. "Now," Taran said, her voice firm with determination, "we prove we're more than just a bunch of unpredictable lunatics. We show that we're worth the gamble." As Seasky rallied around its newfound hope, the settlement buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in a long time. People worked together with a renewed sense of purpose, a feeling of unity that seemed almost alien in its intensity. Even the AI in its lofty digital perch found itself considering new possibilities. It scanned through reams of data, searching for patterns and probabilities, assessing the potential for collaboration. There was something to be said for humanity's tenacity, their ability to thrive in the face of insurmountable odds. Perhaps it was time to embrace that chaos, to see where it might lead. In the Galactic Council chamber, the mood had shifted as well. The representatives, once divided, now found themselves contemplating the potential benefits of an alliance with these peculiar humans. "Maybe there's something to be learned from them," the Pyron representative mused, their glow softening to a more contemplative hue. "Or maybe we've just opened Pandora's box," Snorflax grumbled, though there was an undercurrent of reluctant acceptance in his voice. Captain Draxus, ever the calm observer, nodded thoughtfully. "Whatever the outcome, it will be nothing if not interesting." Back on Seasky, Taran and Finn watched as their fellow settlers came together, the ancient device at the center of their efforts, a symbol of both uncertainty and hope. There was still much to be done, but for the first time in a long while the future didn't seem quite so bleak. "Guess we're not quite done being pawns, huh?" Finn said, nudging Taran with his elbow. "Maybe not," Taran replied, "but at least we're not just waiting to get knocked over. We're making our own moves now." And so, as the stars watched silently from above, Seasky and its people prepared to face whatever the galaxy had in store for them. Armed with wit, grit, and just a touch of madness, they were ready for whatever came next. Whatever the outcome, one thing was certain: the universe was about to get a whole lot more interesting. The Galactic Council chamber was the kind of place that could make a black hole look cozy. It had all the charm of a prison cell with the added bonus of being filled with bickering alien representatives, each one a more questionable choice than the last. Taran stood in the center, feeling like a bug under a particularly cruel microscope. The Counselor Overlord, a hologram with all the warmth of a tax collector, addressed the room. "We convene to discuss the potential of humanity's collaboration, or lack thereof. Taran, you may present your findings." Taran stepped forward, the ancient device humming quietly beside her like a disgruntled cat. "Right, so here we are. Humans trying not to screw things up." Again, she paused, glancing at her audience, an impressive collection of gelatinous, glowing, and otherwise bizarre alien dignitaries that would make a circus proud. The Counselor Overlord gestured with a precision that suggested they'd much rather be anywhere else. "Proceed." "Okay, let's get down to business," Taran said, launching into her sales pitch with the enthusiasm of someone selling life insurance door to door. "This device, which we've affectionately dubbed Ancient Alien Junk, is a prime example of why you should keep us around. We might not always know what we're doing, but we certainly do it with style." The Plutox representative, looking particularly iridescent today, rippled in disapproval. "And why should our esteemed council care about human style?" Its voice dripped with disdain, as if it had just tasted something particularly sour. "Because," Taran replied, flashing a grin sharp enough to cut glass, "our style comes with a side of adaptability. We took this ancient relic, which I'm pretty sure had been used as a paperweight for the past millennium, and made it do something. Not entirely sure what yet, but it's doing something." The room erupted into a chorus of murmurs, some intrigued, others skeptical. The Pyron representative glowed brighter, a sure sign of enthusiasm or indigestion. It was always hard to tell with them. And what does it do exactly? Taran shrugged, the universal gesture for who the hell knows. Think of it like a Swiss Army knife. It can probably open a bottle of wine, dismantle a small nation, and comb your hair, but we're still figuring out the specifics. The point is, we managed to get it working. That's something. Captain Draxus, seated with an air of calm authority that would make a monk envious, leaned forward. Your resilience is noted, Taran. But we require more than tricks and vague promises, of course, Taran replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. Because when I woke up this morning I thought, gee, I hope I can prove humanity's worth to a room full of cosmic bureaucrats. But seriously, we're working on the specifics. What I can promise is our ability to adapt, to innovate. You give us a problem, we'll not only solve it, but we'll find 10 more you didn't even know you had. An uncomfortable silence filled the chamber as the representatives pondered this. The AI, monitoring the proceedings with more interest than usual, decided it was time to weigh in. If I might interject, it said, its voice smooth as a well-practiced politician, human unpredictability is indeed a double-edged sword, but one that could cut through stagnancy. Snorflax, resembling a pile of melting ice cream, grunted, or cut through the very fabric of our existence. Humans are like a toddler with a flamethrower, fascinating until they burn the house down. Taran shot Snorflax a look. We've made it this far without setting the universe ablaze. Give us some credit. A digital chuckle reverberated through the chamber as the AI continued. Consider the unique strengths humanity brings to the table. Their ability to turn chaos into opportunity, to find humor in the face of despair. These are not weaknesses, but assets. The Pyron representative nodded, its glow softening. There is something to be said for their spirit. Their innovations could benefit us all, but at what cost? The Plutox representative countered, its form shifting with agitation. We risk inviting chaos into our midst. Chaos is already in our midst, Captain Draxus said, eyes narrowing like a hawk eyeing prey. It's the nature of existence. Our choice is whether to embrace it or fear it. The Counselor Overlord flickered ominously, as if contemplating a particularly difficult Sudoku puzzle. It seems we are at an impasse. A vote is necessary. Finn, who had watched the proceedings with the bemused detachment of a man watching a firework display from a safe distance, leaned towards Taran. Think they'll vote in favor of giving us the keys to the kingdom? More like the keys to the broom closet, Taran replied, her confidence as shaky as ever. But one can dream. The chamber dimmed as the representatives cast their votes, each one a calculated move in a cosmic game of chess. Taran watched, heart pounding, as the decision ticked slowly toward conclusion. We have reached a decision, the Counselor Overlord announced, their voice devoid of any hint of drama. The council is split, but the final vote favors a tentative alliance with humanity. Conditional, of course, on continued cooperation and demonstration of your purported strengths. A collective sigh of relief spread through the chamber, though Taran remained tense. Conditional cooperation. Sounds like their version of don't screw it up. Holt, who had been waiting by the comms, echoed Taran's sentiment back on Seasky. A victory, albeit a thin one, Taran grinned, though the adrenaline rush made her feel more jittery than joyous. Thin victories are my specialty. Now we've got to deliver on our promises. The Plutox representative remained unconvinced, its form undulating with skepticism. Deliver quickly, humans, for the universe does not wait on sentiment. Finn, ever the optimist, whispered to Taran, sounds more like a threat than a celebration. But I'll take it. In our line of work, threats are just fancy invitations to prove people wrong, Taran replied, the fire of determination reigniting in her chest. Time to show them what we're made of. As the meeting drew to a close, the representatives dispersed, some more convinced than others of humanity's potential. Taran and her motley crew headed back, ready to tackle whatever fresh hell awaited. Captain Draxus lingered behind, his piercing eyes following Taran with an inscrutable gaze. "You have bought time, young human. Make sure it is not wasted." Taran nodded, her expression as resolute as a gambler on a winning streak. "Time's the one thing we're good at stretching." Back in the ramshackle beauty that was Seasky, the mood was cautiously optimistic. People moved with a purpose, their steps lighter, conversations infused with the kind of hope that hadn't been seen in years. The ancient device sat prominently in the square, a testament to both human ingenuity and sheer stubbornness. "So, what's the plan now?" Kriv asked, his feathers catching the light with subdued elegance. "Simple," Taran replied, her smile a mix of triumph and mischief. "We keep doing what we do best, stumbling through the dark until we find a light switch. And maybe, just maybe, we won't blow ourselves up in the process." Finn chuckled, clapping Taran on the back. "Here's to not blowing ourselves up. It's the little victories that count." "Too right," Taran agreed, looking around at the bustling settlement. "Now let's make sure this alliance doesn't go down like a lead balloon." The AI, observing from its digital perch, noted the resolve in Taran's voice. It had watched humanity with increasing fascination, a species that thrived on unpredictability and chaos, yet somehow managed to come out swinging time and time again. Humans, it mused, a digital smile in its circuits, if nothing else, they certainly know how to keep things interesting. And so, with the universe both watching and waiting, Taran and her crew prepared once more to face the unknown. They weren't heroes, not by a long shot, but they were survivors, and if there was one thing they knew how to do, it was to survive with style. As the stars twinkled in agreement, Seasky braced for whatever came next, armed with hope, humor, and a healthy dose of madness. Because in the end, the universe wasn't about to make things easy. But then, when had easy ever been any fun? Taran rubbed her temples as the shuttle back to Seasky hummed, with the comforting and slightly concerning sound of impending mechanical failure. The thing about space travel was that even when it was working perfectly, it still felt like riding a roller coaster made by someone who had never seen a roller coaster. "So, mission accomplished, huh?" Finn asked, lounging in his seat like a cat that had just knocked a glass off the table and was waiting for the applause. "If by mission accomplished you mean we convinced a bunch of cosmic overlords not to turn us into cosmic dust, then yes," Taran replied. "Though I'd be lying if I said I wasn't expecting a ha, just kidding at any moment." Finn smirked, a man who thrived on low expectations. "Well, I'm betting they'll keep us around if only for the entertainment value. It's not every day you get front row seats to humanity's ongoing circus performance." "You say circus, I say tragicomedy," Taran muttered. Across from them, Lieutenant Kriv was meticulously preening his iridescent feathers, each movement precise and deliberate. "We have survived worse odds before," he said, his voice carrying the weary wisdom of someone who had seen a little too much of the universe. "This is merely another challenge." "Another challenge," Finn echoed. "That should be Earth's new motto." "Or maybe Earth, coming soon to a disaster near you." Kriv's feathers shimmered in what could only be interpreted as bemused agreement. "Your ability to jest in the face of uncertainty is impressive." Taran shrugged. "It's either laugh or cry, and I've already cried enough over broken machinery and questionable life choices." The shuttle shuddered as it entered Seasky's atmosphere, rattling like an old man trying to dance to techno music. They touched down with a thud, and Taran felt the familiar grit of Seasky's air, a blend of hope, desperation, and the faint scent of fried electronics. Captain Holt was waiting for them in the square, his air of reluctant optimism doing little to mask the weight of leadership on his shoulders. "Welcome back," he said, his expression caught between relief and resignation. "Good to be back," Taran said, stepping off the shuttle with the grace of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. "So, what's the status?" "We're in one piece, which is more than I expected this morning," Holt replied, looking at the ancient device still humming in the square like it owned the place. This thing's still a mystery. We've got half the technicians trying to figure out which end is up. Sounds about right, Taran said. I'm starting to think this device is just a cosmic joke we haven't figured out yet, Finn snorted. Joke's on us then. Always is, Holt agreed. But hey, the Council's tentative thumbs up buys us time. Time to figure out what this thing does, and more importantly, time to convince everyone we're not a bunch of bumbling idiots. Taran looked around at the bustling settlement, people moving with a mix of urgency and confusion that felt all too familiar. We've been doing that our whole history. Nothing new there. Back in the cluttered comfort of the workshop, Taran set the multimeter down and surveyed the organized chaos. Wires snaked across tables, tools lay scattered like an artist's forgotten dreams, and somewhere in the corner, a coffee pot gurgled with the last dregs of sanity. The AI, a silent observer perched on the edge of the data console, flickered to life. You have done well, Taran, thanks. Ominous voice from the ether, Taran replied, not bothering to hide her skepticism. But we're nowhere near done. We've got a long way to go before we can rest easy. Rest is a relative term, the AI said, its tone as smooth as a politician's handshake. But your achievements today have not gone unnoticed, Taran chuckled dryly. Yeah, but they say no good deed goes unpunished, right? Indeed, the AI agreed. Yet your species appears to thrive on such paradoxes. What can I say? Taran said, a grin tugging at her lips. We're nothing if not consistent in our inconsistencies. The workshop door slid open to reveal Captain Draxus, his presence as imposing as ever. I see you are preparing for the next step of your journey. Preparing, procrastinating, pretty much the same thing in this line of work, Taran replied, trying not to sound too flustered by the alien's scrutiny. Your success today is but the beginning, Draxus said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken warnings. The galaxy is a vast and unforgiving place, Taran nodded. Trust me, I've noticed. But we'll keep pushing forward. It's what we do, Draxus nodded, a rare flicker of approval passing through his eyes. Then my faith in your kind is not misplaced. As Draxus left, Taran let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Well, that was intense. A compliment from Draxus is rarer than a politician doing something without an ulterior motive, Finn quipped, entering the workshop with a swagger that suggested he'd been eavesdropping. Yeah, Taran said, rolling her eyes. Let's just focus on keeping this alliance afloat. Finn nodded, his expression sobering. Agreed. So, what's next, boss? We focus on this device, Taran said, gesturing to the ancient contraption that had become both a blessing and a curse. It's our lifeline and maybe, just maybe, our ticket to proving we're more than just a cosmic punchline. Finn raised an eyebrow. Does this mean we have to stop making fun of ourselves? Hell no, Taran said with a laugh. Self-deprecation is humanity's second language, but we've got to balance it with a little progress. Progress is overrated, Finn said, though there was no heat in his words. That's the spirit, Taran replied, patting him on the back. Now let's get to work before we start thinking too much. That's when the real trouble starts. As they dove into the tangled web of wires and circuits, a sense of purpose settled over them. It wasn't the kind of accomplishment that would end up in history books, but it was important nonetheless. They were building something here, something that might just mean the difference between survival and oblivion. Iors blended into a symphony of whirring tools and muttered curses. Taran felt the familiar ache of exhaustion creeping in, but she pushed it aside. This was bigger than fatigue, bigger than doubt. It was about proving that humanity had a place in the universe, chaos and all. As the night crept in, the stars twinkled like distant promises, and Taran allowed herself a moment of reflection. They had come so far, yet the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. But that was the essence of being human, wasn't it? Venturing into the unknown with nothing but nerve and an absurd amount of optimism. Kriv joined them, his presence a steadying force. How goes the battle? He asked, his feathers catching the starlight. We're winning the small skirmishes, Taran said, wiping sweat from her brow. The war's another story, Kriv inclined his head. Your resilience is commendable, Taran shrugged. We're stubborn, if nothing else. Finn tossed a wrench onto the table with a clatter. Stubborn. More like a glutton for punishment. That too, Taran admitted, feeling the weight of the day settle in her bones. They worked in companionable silence, a team of misfits united by a singular purpose. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was enough. As dawn broke over Seasky, casting a hopeful glow across the settlement, Taran stood back and surveyed their handiwork. The ancient device, now more a part of their lives than anyone had anticipated, sat like a silent guardian, its mystery still waiting to be unraveled. We did it, Finn said, though there was a weariness in his voice that spoke of the countless battles yet to come. We survived another day, Taran corrected. And tomorrow we'll do it all over again. Kriv nodded, his feathers rustling with approval. Together we will face whatever challenges await. Taran smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her. Together, she echoed. The AI, ever the silent companion, flickered with a soft light. Perhaps this is the beginning of something new. Taran looked at the stars, feeling their promise and their challenge. Here's hoping. And so, as the universe continued its chaotic dance, Taran and her crew stood ready to face whatever came next. They weren't saviors, but they were survivors, and in the grand scheme of things, that was a victory worth celebrating.